Thank you very much.
We start with Veronica?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria. This is really a sad case. And actually, when I saw the news, and I've seen the news around the social media,
Thank you very much.
it really kind of saddened me that something like that could happen. Yes. And especially where we expect
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
the caregiving
Maria.
industry to be well
regulated.
this is really a sad case. And
I work in mental health, and what I heard is that this young lady or this lady was working with a mental health patient. But first of all, before I even continue saying anything, my sincere condolences to the family and especially to the children of the lady who has passed on. It is really, really a sad story, and our hearts, and I can tell you the Kenyan community, from what I've seen in the social media, they're very, very concerned, and it comes across as a very sad story to anyone. So my sincere condolences to the family, and I hope that God gives them the strength to continue and to get on with life. So for me, I don't know what you'd want me to comment, but I think the question that I first of all asked is, was there a risk assessment on this young on the patient? Was the carer aware of this risk assessment? Because what we know when I work in the mental health industry is that we always, you work with the care plan, as well as you are supposed to do, to be aware of the risk assessment that has been done within the patient that you're working on. And to be honest with you, when a client, because we call them client, when they are being looked at, one of the things that is really, really first of all done is a risk assessment. So my question has been, and at this point, I would say I haven't been able to talk to anyone. I don't know the deeper inside of the story. I don't know the actual circumstances or what actually happened. But my first question was there a risk assessment? How was she working? Was there a lone working policy? So those are the questions that I've been asking. And as maybe we continue with this conversation, maybe we'll delve into that. So thank you, Maria, for actually kind of been wanting to bring this story into the limelight.
Okay, so Kevine, one of the main things that you will do for us today is tell us what happens in this case in terms of the law. I know that you're an immigration lawyer, but there are facets of this case that are even with the police, and there is an investigation going. What are we looking at?
Thank you, Maria. I think I'll just echo Veronica's words and condolences to the family. It's very sad and it's very worrying, obviously, when you hear these kind of things have happened. And I think any support that can be extended to the family, I think anybody who can, certainly myself, my firm, would be able to do that. I think out of respect, obviously, I'll address some of the questions you're asking in a sort of a hypothetical kind of family setting rather than the specifics, because I don't know the specifics. So, of course, when there are minors involved, I think the first thing to understand about the way the immigration rules are set out, particularly for workers who moved here for work, they fall under what we call the points-based system. So primarily, anybody who's moved here for work, you're considered to be an economic migrant. You've moved for work reasons. So there's a specific purpose for which you've applied for a visa and you're here. Those rules are contained within the immigration rules. And generally, they entitle you, depending on your job, to either move here with your spouse, your children, or together as a family. And in cases where perhaps the parent is a single parent, there's an aspect of what we call sole responsibility. So that at the time of applying, you would have demonstrated that you're the only active parent and have been for some period of time, because generally the rules expect parents should move together. So in a case like this, which I understand there's a single parent who, she was a single parent, we're left with a bit of an anomaly because the points-based rules don't have a provision for discretion when the parent has unfortunately passed away. What that means is we're going to have to look at where else can we find other rules that are applicable. Now, the government or the Home Office or UK Visa and Immigration are obliged under Section 55 of the Borders, Citizen and Immigration Act 2009 to have the best interest of a child in mind, to look at what promotes their welfare, and being wary of any elements of any removal action or potential action that could endanger them. So what they'll be looking at here is, for example, the circumstances under how they came to the UK. So they will be aware that obviously they came with a single mother. They'll be aware of what's happened. There's an ongoing investigation. So during this period of time, they continue to have the permission that they were granted as a result of their mother. So that will continue. But because within the points-based system, there isn't any provisions for discretion, technically, at some point, if nothing is done, that permission will be cut short to 60 days. So, and then they would have to do that because there just isn't any provisions. Typically, what will happen is they would allow that permission to just continue. So depending on how long that permission is valid for, because dependents are always granted in line with the main applicant. So let's assume that permission ends at the end of this year. It will expire at the end of this year unless an application is made to extend their stay. Now, that application cannot be made under the points-based system anymore. And so we would rely on we have two types of rules or guidance that exist outside the immigration rules. We have what we call leave outside the rules, which covers exceptional cases, and we have discretionary leave. So in this case, we'd be looking at the discretionary leave policy, which is cases where there are some extremely compassionate circumstances that apply, which means the Home Office can look at how can these children be allowed to stay. They are technically now unaccompanied children or unaccompanied minors. Social services would obviously be involved. I don't know if the children are all under 18, but if they are, obviously they need to be looked after, they need to be cared for. So local authority probably does get involved. So under discretionary leave, an application would be made, and of course, it would be advisable for the family in Kenya to instruct a firm or anybody to assist them to do this. They don't have to wait until the end, to be honest, and make an application for discretionary leave. It covers non-asylum cases. So these are cases where there are, like I said, compassionate reasons for the family, for the children to be granted leave to remain. Typically, if you succeed, that would normally be given 2.5 years. It can be longer. And in some cases, you can even be granted indefinite leave to remain. It really depends on the facts of the case. So because there's an investigation going on, what I would say is, yes, there is an avenue for them to be able to make an application to stay, and that is the right and proper thing to do. There is a concession for the fee not to be paid because immigration application fees can be very expensive. Just to give you an example, the typical fee, if you were to pay for an equivalent application of this type, would cost 3,900 per applicant. So if there's more than one child, you're looking at upwards of 14,000 pounds, and that's without a guarantee of success. So it's important that if the application is made, there is no fee for unaccompanied minors, but even if there was a fee, there is a policy we call a fee waiver policy, where you can apply and say, look, I can't afford to pay the fee because I would be destitute or at risk of destitution. I wouldn't be able to meet my needs. So that shouldn't be a barrier. At least they should be able to make that without having to pay any fee. Factors that they would look at include the age of the children, how long they've been here. I believe there's no family member in the UK. They'll be looking at, are there any particular aspects of the children? For example, are there medical conditions to be considered? Because you've got to remember, the government ultimately has a public interest in the effective maintenance of immigration control, in as much as nobody wants to imagine them thinking, oh, they're trying to remove, but that is their job, that is their duty. That doesn't mean they'll be pushing for it, but it's a balancing exercise. It's a balancing exercise of seeing what are the factors in favor of removal. On the one hand, the government can sometimes suggest, you lived in Kenya before, you must have family there. On the other hand, they'll be looking at, but you have moved here. Something very unfortunate, unexpected has happened. You have started integrating into the UK. It is probably best, this is something tragic and traumatic. Depending on even where the parent is buried, for example, that could have an impact because of emotional reasons. So they'll be looking at all these factors. And, if I was preparing the application, these are some of the things that we'd be looking to highlight and say, well, they have a deep connection here now. And certainly, even if you were to suggest it's not now, you should be suggesting that. So unless they were granted a higher threshold of indefinite leave to remain, if it is a limited period, that just means that they at least get reprieve for the next 2.5 years, minimum roughly, can be shorter sometimes. And you get to prepare and apply again sometime in the future. And obviously they get supported in the meantime, they get the necessary support, financial support, all the above, okay? I think that really covers generally what the options are within immigration. So there's other things we can discuss. That just means that point of view, they at least get reprieve there for now.
I think you've really covered a lot, and I don't know if there are people in the family that actually understand what it is that they're dealing with or what kind of options that they actually have, because as much as it is a grieving period, my biggest worry about all this is that there are children involved, and it's something that needs to be handled with a lot of care. So we come back to you, Veronica, to talk about this particular case of care work. And what kind of rules exist in that particular field to make sure that people are safe and protected?
As a mental health worker, what I do know is, as I said, is that every time you are assigned a patient or you're going to work to a patient, there is always, first of all, there is always a proper assessment that is supposed to have been done or is done. Secondly, as I said, there is a risk assessment, and then there is the care plan. So, and every worker is supposed to be very conversant with what's the assessment, what are the issues. Then the second thing is what are the risk assessment. Do they need 1-to-1? Do they need 2-to-1? Do they need, are they supposed to be observed all the time? And also, within that, as much as you're looking at the risk, what are the risks that the client poses, there is also what about you and your own safety as well. So they always go hand in hand. And as I said, that is the main question that personally I asked myself when I heard the story, that what could have been or what are the circumstances? And as I said, I don't know the proper and deep, I don't know the risks or the circumstances. For instance, I don't know the diagnosis of the client. I'm not sure what he was suffering from. I don't know the circumstances that she was taken care of in terms of in which area or in what capacity. Although I understand it is as a carer. So the question here is: was there a risk assessment? Was she well informed about it? Did she know that she was in danger or she could be in danger? And who was responsible for this? Because I understand, I think it's an agency, so I don't know whether it's NHS or agency, and what were the responsibilities of the agency to make sure that their worker or the carer that they have employed is safe from any danger. The other thing is that how much was the carer trained to be able to be aware of what to look for and how to take care of themselves, as well as taking care of the person that they were taking care of. So there are so many questions within that, and these are the things that are actually looked. So, for example, whatever has happened, if there is a case going on, I think this is what they'll be looking at about the client, the assessment, the risk assessment, and also they will be looking at the employer, what was their responsibilities in terms of making sure that their employee is actually safe and they were given the right tools, the right information, everything that is required for me to be able to work in a safe place, as well as protecting me as a carer and also protecting the client as a client, because the risk assessment goes both ways. So the question here is, what were the circumstances that led to this tragic thing happening? And what were the responsibilities of all parties? And could that be looked at without things not being able to be looked at very properly?
So you've mentioned something. I'll just come back to you again. You'd said that as part of risk assessment, there is something called a lone working policy that determines if it is safe for a patient and a carer to be alone in the same room. How does that work?
So it works like that. When you are alone working, that means if you are assigned a client to go and work with, and you're working on your own, again, it comes with also that risk assessment. It also looks at you as a lone worker. What are the things that have been kept? What is the information that you've been given, or what cover that policy covers? Is, are you aware? What are you supposed to do when this and this happens? Who are you supposed to contact? Like, for example, you're supposed to, if when you're a lone worker, you're supposed to inform someone that you are going to work, you are going to see the client. The other thing is, when you are live, you are supposed to let somebody know that you have arrived there. Now, when you leave, it's also good to be able to say that you have left. Sometimes people have codes. So, like, for example, if you go and assess the situation and you find that things are not really safe, people use codes. So they would use their phone. So they are supposed to have to make sure that their phone is on. They are aware of the emergency numbers. So those are the information that, as a worker, as a lone worker, you are supposed to have on your fingertips. Emergency number, your phone should be on, it should be charged all the time. And when you get there and you assess the situation and things are not good or is not safe, do you have a code? Because then you can call number and say, for example, you can say, can you check on the red file? Sometimes people use something like that. Then people know that you are in danger and they are supposed to do something immediately. Then there is always a time, like when you go to see a client, and when you finished, have you let somebody know, so that if it takes more than the necessary time, then people are allowed to start looking for you and to finding out where you are. So those are the things that they don't work in policy. I haven't covered everything, but those are the basics to make sure that as you're a worker and you're going to work as a own parent, as a own carer, or as a own professional, especially with a mental health patient, those are the things that you need to be able to be aware of. And the question is, was something like that in place? Did she get a point of using it, or what were the circumstances? As I said, we don't know the circumstances, and those are the things that I think probably that you ask yourself, were they there? And what are they going to do about it, or what had they done about it as employers?
Okay, so we are looking at this issue and saying that maybe there is something that could have been done. Maybe Irene did not have to go the way that she did because this is a safety issue. But I think it speaks to a bigger systemic issue, because from what I'm reading online and from what I was trying to discover who she was and what she was doing in the UK, she died in that particular house. She didn't have her last check-in. I'm concerned that nobody really bothered to follow up to know what was going on. It could be an assumption because this is still an open investigation case. You might not really have a lot of facts to go with. But from what I'm reading is she missed a check-in and she was quite in there for a very, very long time. Why didn't anyone raise an alarm? And another question is this something that happens often? And I think both of you would have to comment because you've probably come across this information from time to time. Why didn't anyone raise an alarm that something was happening? I would say there was negligence and assumption. This is mental health. We both know how a patient can be. Why didn't anyone check? Why is it that it's until the next day that something is being discovered? Something is wrong.
Let me.
Yeah, go on, Veronica. I think speak to the how that works, because I don't know how that works, but I can maybe just briefly comment on what I think is what this highlights in a broader context. It's important for anybody who doesn't have indefinite leave to remain, who has moved here for work, and I look at this both from the millions of people from Africa, all sorts of countries who've come here, who are providing a very valuable service. There's clearly a need because the labor market here doesn't have that labor to do those jobs. That because you fall under the points-based system, you're only protected insofar as you carry on doing that job. Your sponsor retains the license. Things have to be right. The second things go wrong, you're very vulnerable because children might find a way, like in a similar case, to apply for something. But for example, a bereaved partner may not if they didn't have children. So economic migrants, and I don't like using that term, but I just use it to describe it's the purpose you've moved over for your own reasons to better your life, your family, and so on, because there's an opportunity. We're in a vulnerable position because the rules are very strict, okay? Now, I juxtapose that to look at, okay, who's bringing you over? And this is where perhaps Veronica can expand a bit more. What I see is there's a period of time where all sorts of agencies have come up, and the extent to which there are systems, procedures, policies, knowledge about what to do, I'd probably say it was perhaps too easy for too many agencies to come up, okay? Such that those actually with experience, you will find the common traits. There are proper systems, procedures. Of course, something can always happen despite having the best systems. But from a broader point of view, I'm just commenting that it's important for everybody to probably take stock and look at the company you're working for. Are there procedures that make you feel that you know your job, you know you've been trained well, you're able to ask questions, you're able to raise concerns, and the likes. And even if you face some difficulty, to understand the reason you should do those things is because the particular visa you're on is a very vulnerable one, which doesn't really give you a lot of protection. So I think I can't really comment as to, your question as well as negligence, because I simply can't. But just from a broader point of view, there's loads of people who moved here. And I think what this highlights is for us really to be looking at who are we working for? Are the systems right? Do we feel like, our families are protected when you go to work, when you come back? That's this kind of thing.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that. Veronica?
Yeah, I would echo what Kevin has said. It really, I think what I would say is, as Kevin has said, when you come here and maybe you don't have all, you don't know everything, and maybe, you're not probably trained very well. And I think it's good to let people know when they come in, it's good to be able to know the industry you're working in, get to know what are your rights, what information you're supposed to have, the training you're supposed to have. But as Kevin has also said, sometimes when you come here, and we have seen it quite often, or we have had it quite often, when you are in that position of vulnerability because your visa or whatever is happening, maybe it doesn't give you that leeway of asking those questions. And sometimes also things can be done easily, and because as human beings, sometimes we take things kind of easy sometimes, or because something has not happened, we kind of get on with things, and we don't do what is necessary, if I could say that. That could lead to people kind of getting themselves in danger, because you're taking this, is a job, I have to do it, I need it, because as Kevin says, with that economic migrant, you want a job, you need a job, and for that matter, because a job is available, you just take it. And sometimes you don't go through the necessary, or we don't take things seriously, or we are not well informed, whatever could be the reason. And that could be putting us, could put you in danger, or could put people in danger. And what I'll be advising also is for people who bring people here, it's also good to really educate people and inform people, and especially about their safety, because that is paramount. Because what's the point then of coming to work and then you lose your life because, you wanted the money, or you wanted to earn a living, and then in the process you lose your life? Then it doesn't make any sense in the bigger picture. So it is always good, you might as well take longer to kind of learn, get well trained, and have confidence in whatever you're doing without lashing into earning the money that we want to earn because we have come here to work, or you've come here to work or to earn some money. And I do understand the need to be able to want to work, but also it is also very good to be able to take care of your own, to be aware of your own safety. and for you to be able to, and I'll be talking this to people who are coming to work here, or even people who are already here and they go to work on a daily basis. This is a wake-up call to be able to think about, am I safe where I go to work? What do I need to be able to be aware of? What do I need to take care of? What do I need to know so that you can keep yourself safe? I think that is what I would put onto that.
Okay, so thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you for sharing that part of engaging in this conversation. So it's still an ongoing investigation, and there's still so much that will come up. But the most important part is, wishing condolences to the family, calling upon the Kenyan community in wherever they are to support them. And maybe if you can give a call to action to community members where they can get to them and maybe speak to them, and most to support the children, because as Kevin has said, it's going to take some time before, the law starts taking its course. We do not know the specifics of how this is going. It's still fairly new, and the wheels of justice move quite slowly. So a call to action to community members where you stay and where she's staying. I think it's Birmingham.
Yeah, I think she lived in Birmingham. Yes.
Yeah, so if Kenyans were going to listen today, what would you tell them in terms of calling them out to support them? We want them to make enough noise. If this is something, if there was foul play, if there was something that could have been done, if we need to hold an agency accountable, we're speaking to that matter today.
Is that directed to me?
To both of you, because
right. Yeah, probably as a wraparound. I think.
No, yeah,
Yeah, probably what I do say, and I do emphasize this, not just to Kenyans, but literally everybody. Your immigration is one of those things. People tend to sort of rely on the rumor mill, kind of like, oh, I heard somebody did this, so therefore it's going to work, and that kind of thing. And I know, like, back home, these are things we kind of rely on. Things work differently, right? Here, systems actually do work. They don't work perfectly, but it's important to have information, right? There's a joke that if you want to hide things from Africa and write them down, it's not a good joke, but it's really important to understand. You really need to know what is your situation, and please ask. Yes, I know professionals like myself, we do charge a fee for advice and so on, but I can tell you, for example, we'll never say no to answering a phone call when you have a question. Everyone can be busy, but it's important to get professional advice about your circumstances. It's important we support each other with the right information. I come across cases where people incite each other at the workplace to go and do the wrong thing. Why would you do that? And then you lose your job. So even in a situation where people can protect themselves, I still find a lot of misinformation going on. And I think people should seek out professionals, whomever it is you feel you can trust. Seek out that person, speak to them, and at least have some facts for yourself. I think it would be good because don't forget, these agencies that are in this industry, these companies, they're also facing a big problem. The wider problem is social care is heavily underfunded, extremely underfunded. And the difficulty with that means is that they're being asked to operate within very, very tight budget constraints, which can obviously start to suggest that the more you push a company, the more things could, start to crack and so on. Some may shut down. So I think this sort of collegiate, sort of spirit is what we would like to see. The final bit is that it's important for people to also think ahead, because, when I say think ahead, in this instance, for example, the employer's insurance should kick in to support the family in some, as the beneficiaries. I think the family should be able to apply for a visitor visa or something, come over and be able to handle a few things. Whether she had a will or didn't have a will, that's important. It depends on, whether they can obtain the authority to administer her estate insofar as it was here, whether she had life insurance. These are the sort of things that I think it's good to think about and just have those in mind, and really give each other the right information. And if we don't know, let's refer each other to people who do know.
talking about referring, Veronica, I'll come to you. Talking about referring, Kevin, it is my understanding that the family is in Kenya. The bigger part of the extended family is in Kenya, and she's only there with her children, which means, as you've said, they've been left alone. Is there a way, apart from a visitor visa, whereby a guardian can be assigned to these children in the framework in the UK so that they do not have to uproot their life again? Because remember, they were in Kenya and then they have gone to the UK, they have lost a parent. There is a possibility that they could be uprooted back to their home country depending on how this goes. But is there a way the family can say, okay, let's have one guardian to move over there and take care of these children so that their life is not disrupted that much, considering they've already lost a parent?
Well, yes and no. First of all, a guardian isn't considered a parent within the immigration context. So what that means is a guardian obviously has the right to make decisions over the child and so on. And of course, there can also be concession outside the rules to consider somebody to be given that position. But because the family member hypothetically isn't here, what that means is the starting point is from during this whole period, somebody needs to step in, and usually that will be social services who will step in the meantime. Okay, there might be close friends or people who lived around who somebody might volunteer and say, look, I'm willing to sort of be that figure. Whether they'll go the next step to say, I want to be a guardian, is something obviously that also involves what the family wants, for example. There is no provision to be able to apply from outside the UK because the granting of such orders must go to court. So an application to the family court must be made. You can obviously they can instruct from outside the UK, certainly, but it's going to take a bit of time. The court process takes time and so on. This is why we say, look, practically what you need is boots on the ground. So you want somebody here physically in the meantime, somebody who can. So obviously the challenge there is they might be working in business, they might not be able to be here for a long time. But ultimately, if they have representation, then there will be people who will be able to progress steps, okay? They might be looking at, for example, adoption. That could be something they could be looking at, which is really the remedy that you need here in a similar case, really, because adoption means you have now taken over the responsibilities of the biological parent, and that then allows you to be able to apply for something. It's a much more stable status. So probably looking at something along those lines. But this really it really does need a very detailed consultation to understand the family setup. You need to understand the whole family setup and the situation of the children, so that then they can get the proper advice as to what's the next steps. This will probably take more than a year plus. And there's various stages to go through, both from the family law aspect and from the immigration aspect.
Okay, so say for example, this conversation will get to the family members somehow. Social media is a life force on its own. Say someone is not informed. One, can they call you and say you charge? You're a lawyer, you're a consultant, which means you do charge. But if you were to give them a starting point, what would that be? You tell them, okay, this has happened. This is where you need to start from.
I can't answer that because I don't. I need to know the age of the children, for example. Are there kids who are over 18, for example? Because if there are, generally kids over 18 who came under 18 can continue, but in the context of there's a parent. So there's a lot of unknowns. I think the starting point is. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Kevin.
Yeah, I'd say that the starting point is somebody needs to be appointed to give instruction to start looking at the children's case. That's the starting point. So they need to reach out or appoint somebody to who they can liaise with, because there's a lot of background information needed, So one really needs to understand, for example, how vulnerable are the children. Like I said before, if say one of the kids has a medical condition, that can alter how you handle things. So you've got to really get to understand how vulnerable are they. Every child is vulnerable, of course, without their parents, but how vulnerable are they? That's very important. Secondly, they have needs. The financial side of things needs to be looked at. So those who are in the social worker industry would be able to give some guidance on what sort of funding is available, before a family member can be here, is there anybody who can take responsibility for them in terms of the day-to-day, going to school, therapy, all these things. There's just so many decisions that need to be made. So even before you get to the advice bit, you want to understand, okay, but can we make sure that the children are sort of settled in some sort of routine, and can we understand that? Then you shift to looking at, okay, who in the family in Kenya, for example, is the person who's putting their hands up and saying, I'm going to take charge of this. I want to be able to come over. I want to be able to do this. Again, you don't assume that somebody's putting their hands up to say that. You expect it, but you don't assume. Once you know who that person is, you then want to look at what their situation is. Are they employed? Are they self-employed? Just because a massively tragic thing has happened, when he or she is making an application, you've still got to meet the requirements of, if it's a visitor visa, to come over to be able to deal with these things. You still have to meet those requirements. They're not just going to give you a free pass. So they'll also want to understand what is your situation, so that that application is prepared in a way that it can succeed. So that then that succeeds, you have a family member here, there's been some measures put in place for the children, then you can move on to the next phase, because their leave is not at risk immediately. So you can be able to focus more on their well-being and getting a family member here first. Okay. So that is the order in which personally I would be taking things. We need to know all the background information, and then we can say advise, okay, let's do step 1, step 2, step 3, and have a particular pattern in play.
Would you be the correct law firm for the family to contact, or they would need someone with a different set of expertise?
We are one of many who can assist.
But you can assist.
We can assist, but there can be many. Like I said, we're one of many, and obviously we are open to they can reach out to us, but we're one of many. So there'll be different aspects. For example, we don't typically do a lot of family law, but I do work, for example, with counsel who does family law. So it's because you've got to remember what myself and my partner might be willing to do in our firm, in the context of being very lenient or even helping as much as we can. Another professional may not be able to do so. So we're one of many. Okay. So, but certainly we are open to, to reach out to us, and would be more than happy to help. No questions.
Okay. If there is definitely something that can be done to make sure that the children remain safe in whatever context this actually ends up in, that would be of utmost importance at the moment. Veronica, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. That's very good. Yeah. So I think for us as a community, I would say is just to rally around the family. In fact, the other day I was just asking whether there is a WhatsApp group or anything, so that, because I know Kenyans as a community, we are very good at supporting people during especially a difficult time like this one. And I think it's just about reaching out to the family, and also the family reaching out for any help that they can get out there. Because some of these things you can never do on your own. You need support and you need help from all spheres of life. Like they would probably need advice on the legal issues. They would need advice on other issues, but also the financial help to support the family and the young kids. So, as I said, what I would ask is, as a community, it would be good if we reached out to the family and give them the proper support that we can be able to give them during this difficult time. And I personally am very ready to do that, because I've already made contact to see where or who is who, so that we can be able to help the best way that we can be able to help. So, and I would also be advising them as family is to reach out for any help or any advice, because as Kevine said, information is very, very, when you're well informed, you make good decisions. But when you're not well informed, and it's also good to get information or advice from professionals, so that they can be able to be well advised and be able to deal with the issue as they come. So because it's not one thing, it's really kind of a as we have talked about their children, there is the death itself, there is all these things, and So I think the best thing is we just come together and support the family, as is the Kenyan spirit. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are coming to this conversation because the most important thing was to us to say condolences to the family and tell them that there is another way, there is information out there. There are people like Kevine that said that his farm is one among the many law firms that can give the right information, and we are Kenyans, and maybe there's something that another family member did and it worked out for them. But this is a very unique case, it's a very unique situation. There is death involved, there is the UK law involved, and there is the UK police, which means you cannot afford to do something wrong, or you cannot even afford to use the back door if the children are supposed to remain safe, or even this issue is supposed to be handled conclusively. So we do urge the family that in this period of mourning, they take heart, but while doing that, they also reach out to professionals to help them in handling this particular matter. So continue engaging with us in our social media platforms, the Kenyan Diaspora Media on X, on TikTok, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Comment and ask your questions, and we are going to be able to send them. We're going to continue finding ways. Maybe if there is a GoFundMe that's been opened up for the family to support them in their endeavors, we are also going to endeavor to get that information out there, because I know this is one case of one Kenyan, but it speaks to a larger issue. It speaks to things that are happening in the care industry. It could be not death, but it could be a safety issue that is going on. So if you're in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, or any part of the diaspora that you're listening to us, and there are things like this that are happening, please make some noise. Do not suffer alone. There are systems and there are people that are willing to help you. And as the Kenya Diaspora Media, we purpose to bring this conversation to the front line so that it can get to the right people, it can get the right assistance. We are coming to the end. Thank you for staying with us. To the family of Irene Mbugua, we wish you condolences and we wish you peace as you continue planning to lay your loved one to rest. Thank you for listening to us in this hour, and we look forward to seeing you in the next. Ambia ni wa Kenya, kwaheri.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Kevine, and thank you, Veronica. I'll see you next time.